The Detroit Lions have officially suffered their second defeat of the season at the hands of the Buffalo Bills. A battle between the NFC's number one team and the NFL's potential MVP. There was supposed to be fireworks. There was supposed to be a lot of scoring. There was supposed to be a very close, very entertaining game. And that's exactly what we got. In a game that ended in a 48-42 victory by the Buffalo Bills, saw Buffalo come into Detroit with Super Bowl aspirations and leave Detroit as Super Bowl favorites. However, the loss isn't what we're going to talk about today because, yeah, they lost the game. Josh Allen was fantastic. The defense struggled a lot. The offense was quite good, and it was a high scoring affair. Those are things that everybody knows. Those are things that everybody can see. But the aftermath of that game is what really has a lot of people talking, not only with the significant injuries suffered, but of course, with everybody now coming out saying that the Detroit Lions are a fraudulent football team. And today, that is what we are going to be talking about. We're going to take a look at not only the loss to the Buffalo Bills, not only the victory against Green Bay 2 weeks ago, but the remainder of the Detroit Lions regular season schedule, the overlook and kind of outlook for the NFL playoffs, and whether or not this Detroit Lions team is kind of dead in the water or whether they can actually still make some noise in the NFC playoffs. So, let's start off with the Buffalo Bills loss. As I said, it was the second loss of the season, a 48-42 defeat that saw Josh Allen go for 430 scrimmage yards and 4 touchdowns, saw James Cook go for 105 yards on the ground with a touchdown as well, and saw former Detroit Lions running back Ty Johnson have 5 receptions for 114 yards. This game was bad defensively. The Detroit Lions didn't get, I don't think, a true stop on defense until the fourth quarter. And by then, the Buffalo Bills had a 10 to 17 point lead, depending on what time it was. And the game was essentially over. The Detroit Lions fought to the end. They made it a one-score game and gave themselves the chance with an onside kick. But at the end of the day, the Detroit Lions were handled pretty well in this game by Buffalo. The offense was fantastic by the Buffalo Bills. As I said, didn't really have a true stop until the fourth quarter against them. They ran the ball efficiently. Josh Allen escaped the pocket at will, made some massive plays and some throws downfield, and it ended up being one of the toughest games the Detroit Lions had to play. Good news is that the Detroit Lions don't have to play the Bills again. It is a AFC matchup, and the only scenario in which they would play the Bills again would be if they reach the Super Bowl, which I still think is possible. The bad news is that the Detroit Lions left this game with not one, not two, not three, but four more season ending injuries. That, of course, being Ali McNeil, who suffered a torn ACL, meaning he likely won't return to the Detroit Lions until at least week 12 of the 2025 season. Khalil Dorsey broke his leg in a very similar fashion to Aiden Hutchinson. He will be out for quite a while and may not be ready for week one, but could potentially be ready for the preseason, just depending on the recovery process. Carlton Davis has having jaw surgery and is out indefinitely for a minimum of 6 weeks, meaning, again, if the Lions do end up reaching the Super Bowl, they could potentially see their number one cornerback return. But again, that is a large aspiration without their number one cornerback. And of course, I think the biggest news of the week, the Lions have lost David Montgomery. They have lost their hammer on offense. They have lost their short yardage back, and they've lost a lot of life on that offense. I think David Montgomery brings a ton to the offense outside of just the short yardage gains. He is a reliable weapon for short yardage situations and red zone situations, of course, but his pass protection is second to none on that offense. He is one of the best pass protecting backs that the Detroit Lions have. And while Craig Reynolds and Jahmyr Gibbs aren't necessarily bad options, they're not nearly as good or polished in pass protection as David Montgomery. They don't bring the power that David Montgomery brings, and I don't think, quite honestly, that they bring the energy that David Montgomery brings. Of all the losses the Lions suffered on Sunday afternoon, David Montgomery is by far the most impactful, right? Because Aleem McNeil was playing great. The Lions are already suffering on defense, and they still have DJ Reader and Pat O'Connor and Levi Onwuzurike who are playing good football. Carlton Davis is a massive blow, but they still have Terrion Arnold. They're expecting Emmanuel Mosley to come back. They're expecting Ennis Rakestraw to return within a couple of weeks before the playoffs, so they still have a little bit of depth. David Montgomery is out. Jahmyr Gibbs is a great back and is going to take on a large sum of the workload left behind. But Craig Reynolds isn't matching David Montgomery. I don't think Sione Vaki is necessarily going to match what David Montgomery did. And for the 3 injuries that are to starters, I think David Montgomery will be the biggest blow of all. And I think it will really hurt the Lions offense drastically. Now, taking a look after this loss, the Lions are a half game ahead now in both the NFC North and the NFC Conference. Despite having the same record as the Eagles and the Vikings, the Lions are still first place. They are on top of things. They are first place in the division. They are first place in the conference with a remaining schedule of Chicago, San Francisco, and Minnesota. The math basically lines up to the fact that if the Lions win 2 of these 3 games, they likely win the North. If the Detroit Lions win one of Chicago or San Francisco, they will go into week 18 with a chance to take the North. They have to win in week 18, but they only have to win one of the next 2 games to put themselves in that situation. And I think that's pretty likely, right? The Detroit Lions are still a 12-2 football team. The Detroit Lions are still one of the best football teams in the NFL. Over the last 2 games, they've played the 10-4 Packers and the, I believe, 10-4, 11-3 Buffalo Bills. 2 playoff teams, 2 teams that are going to have probably 12 wins on the season at a minimum. They are 1-1 in those games. They are still a very good football team. I know that over the last couple of weeks, it doesn't feel like they're the best football team anymore. They are still a very good football team. They are still a much better football team than both Chicago and San Francisco, and they should win at minimum 1, if not both of those games going into week 18. That being said, the defense has struggled recently, allowing 72 points in the last 6 quarters of play, allowing nearly 900 passing yards and 300 rushing yards. The defense having just a single turnover in that time frame, and yet allowing 7 touchdowns on the ground. It is not pretty for Detroit. The run defense in particular, their identity from a season ago, is not good. And a lot of that has to do with injuries to the linebacking core. While Jack Campbell is fantastic, Ezekiel Turner, Quan Alexander, Jamal Adams are not, right? And especially losing Trevor Nowaske just a couple of days before you go play Josh Allen, one of the best scrambling quarterbacks in football, it's going to hurt quite a bit. The Lions luckily will welcome back Trevor Nowaske next week and potentially Alex Anzalone the week after. But as of right now, the defense is struggling. They are hurting, and they need to get some things fixed on that side of the ball. Offensively, the Detroit Lions are still pretty good. Offensively, they have Jared Goff at quarterback, Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, with potentially Sione Vaki or Craig Reynolds taking snaps as the reliever. You have Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow, Kevin Zeitler, and Penei Sewell as your starting 5 offensive line, your full 5 starters that you began the season with, and one of the best lines in football. St. Brown is still healthy. Jameson Williams is still healthy. Tim Patrick is still healthy. Sam Laporta is still healthy. The offense is pretty good. The offense over the last 2 games has scored 34 and 42. They are still a top offense. They are still one of the best offenses in football and one of the best offenses in NFL history. If the defense can start carrying their weight and holding opponents to just 24, 28 points per game, the Lions are still going to have a chance to win every single game of their upcoming schedule. Defensively, it's bad, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people believe. The defensive line as of right now is Zadarius Smith, DJ Reader, Levi Onwuzurike, and Pat O'Connor, depending on the down distance and situation, and Josh Paschal. That is your front 4. That is better than what they had against the Packers on Thursday Night Football. That is serviceable as far as 4 guys that I trust to start the football game and play significant snaps in the football game. 5 guys if you count Pat O'Connor. And if you can develop a couple of guys like Broderick Martin on the backside, that's going to help the Lions defensive line out a ton. The linebacking core is where it gets scary. Jack Campbell, Trevor Nowaske, and Quan Alexander are your top 3 linebackers. They've signed Anthony Pittman. They have Benjamin Neiman. They have a couple of guys at linebacker that can play well, but haven't played their best football as of recently. The last game versus Buffalo is the prime example. I think the biggest issue, even with Josh Allen's escapability, even with the big plays through the air, I think the biggest issue in that game was the linebacker play. Ezekiel Turner could not get it done. Simply couldn't. He was spied on Josh Allen, couldn't keep up, couldn't catch him, couldn't tackle. And the linebacking play, the tackling at the second level, was pitiful. And that is what has cost the Detroit Lions some pretty massive gashes in the run game and has been the cause of the Lions losing their identity. That is the big issue going forward. The Lions need to get healthy at linebacker, and luckily they're going to pretty soon, but they do have to survive next week against Chicago. The secondary is going to be Terrion Arnold, Kendall Vildor, or Emmanuel Mosley, depending on what the Lions feel is their best situation at the time, with Amik Robertson, Kirby Joseph, and Brian Branch. Good news for the Detroit Lions secondary. Ifeatu Melifonu's practice window has officially started, meaning he could potentially play this weekend, giving a lot more versatility to the defensive back room, giving a lot of versatility to the secondary. It means you can move Brian Branch around, which means you can move Robertson around, which means you might not have to rely on Mosley or Vildor. There's a lot of different ways the Lions can affect the secondary with Melifonwu coming back. And if he is able to play against Chicago, I do think that'll be quite a big get, right? Melifonwu has played linebacker for the Lions. He has played safety for the Lions. He's played corner for the Lions. He's played slot for the Detroit Lions. He is a chess piece. He is a versatile piece in the secondary, and adding him back will give the Lions quite a bit of added boost to the defensive side of the ball. Taking a look at the injury returns, Trevor Nowaske suffered a concussion, I believe, on Thursday or Wednesday of last week prior to the Bills game, and of course did not play. He should be returning for the Chicago game, which gives the Lions a small boost at linebacker. Ifeatu Melifonwu, as we just talked about, has had his 21-day window opened, meaning he could potentially play this Sunday, but more likely he ends up playing next week versus San Francisco, giving that versatility back to the secondary. Emmanuel Mosley has been off the injury report for quite a while. He hasn't been injured for 2 to 3 weeks, hasn't been on the practice report at all. He's been full practicing, but he has been a healthy scratch for the last few weeks. With the downfall of Carlton Davis, I don't see that being the case anymore. You need all the depth you have in the secondary. Mosley has to play. So at minimum, 2 players are returning this week for the Detroit Lions, one in the secondary, one at linebacker, with a potential third with Ifeatu Melifonwu. Looking forward, Alex Anzalone is eligible to return next week, I believe, and I do believe that he will. His injury was a fractured forearm, 6 to 8 week injury. Next week, I believe, is week 7 in his recovery. Week 18 will be week 8. He should return before the playoffs and return in particular before Minnesota. So that is something for the Lions to look forward to. Khalif Raymond is expected to be back sometime around week 18 or the wild card round. That will give the Detroit Lions a great kick returner, punt returner, and a good weapon on offense back. And then, although we don't have a particular date, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. is expected to return at some point before the playoffs. When asked about it yesterday, Dan Campbell said that they weren't totally sure exactly what the timeline looked like, that he wasn't practicing with Ifeatu, right? He hasn't been activated from that list, but he will be returning soon. And it was actually tweeted out by Ennis Rakestraw himself that he as well will be returning soon to the Detroit Lions defense. Meaning, the Detroit Lions week 18/playoff defense, assuming there are no more catastrophic injuries, is Zadarius Smith, DJ Reader, Levi Onwuzurike with Pat O'Connor as the defensive tackle trio with Josh Paschal. That is a good run-stopping front. That is a good run-stopping edge rusher with Paschal. That is a good run-stopping defensive tackle with DJ Reader. And Smith, Levi, and O'Connor can hold their own in that aspect as well. Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, and Trevor Nowaske, despite not being the best linebacking trio the Lions have had, are far from the worst. They are going to stop the run better. They are going to limit big plays much better than they did a week ago, and they're going to be better damage control to the defense than what Quan Alexander and Ezekiel Turner have provided. The secondary is going to be Terrion Arnold with Emmanuel Mosley, Ennis Rakestraw potentially, depending on how they feel about his development, Amik Robertson, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, and Ifeatu Melifonwu. That secondary 6-7 players is a good rotation to have. Again, Melifonwu can play linebacker, he can play safety, he can play corner, he can allow Brian Branch to go into the slot, meaning you have the ability to kick Robertson out to boundary. There's a lot of moves the Lions can make and a lot of changes they can go through with Melifonwu on the field, and we'll talk about that when he is officially activated and playing, but it's going to be better than what they've had, right? You compare this to the Thursday night football game against Green Bay 2 weeks ago. They were starting Zadarius Smith They were starting Miles Adams and Broderick Martin at defensive tackles with Al Qadain Muhammad, who played very well on Thanksgiving, but outside of that has been pretty quiet. Your linebackers from that game were Jack Campbell, Ezekiel Turner, and Quan Alexander on 4 days of preparation, and your secondary was beat up a little bit as well. So going into week 18 from even just a few weeks ago, your defensive line gets better, your linebacking core gets better, your cornerback depth gets significantly improved. And I think going into the playoffs, this defense, despite not being the top 5 unit we've come to know this season, can get the job done. This is a defense that can hold any opponent to 24 points. This is a defense that can force turnovers. This is a defense that can limit the big runs. This is a defense that can get to the quarterback. And I think it's a defense that can help the Lions reach their ultimate goals of a Super Bowl. Now, with that being said, week 16 and 17 will dictate the Lions season, right? They need to win one of the 2 games against Chicago or San Francisco. If they win just one, they go into week 18 with a chance to win the division. If they win either in Chicago or in San Francisco, week 18 is the matchup for the North. Now, if they win both and Minnesota loses to either Seattle or Green Bay, the Lions have the division locked up, right? Going back to that Thursday night football game, the Lions beat the 10-4 Green Bay Packers with 2 turnovers in the red zone and essentially spotting them 14 points. The Lions are not a bad football team. Last year at this time, right, when they were playing the Saints and they were playing even right before the Broncos game, I came out and I said, this team is not a good football team. They're allowing a lot of points. And even though the offense is playing well, they are not going to win football games like this consistently in the playoffs. I don't think this is the same team as last year. I don't think this is the same problem as last year. The offense is still playing quite well. The defense is allowing points, but the points against the Packers are misleading. The fact that they allowed 31 at all is significantly misleading, considering 2 Packers drives started within the Lions red zone. And the Packers are a 10-4 football team. They beat a playoff football team with 2 turnovers in their red zone and still walked away with a victory. They went up against maybe the most dangerous team in football in Buffalo a week ago and kept it within 6 points with significant injuries throughout that game. I trust this Detroit Lions football team to get it done. I think this Detroit Lions football team is better than last year, even missing Aiden Hutchinson. And I do think that not only will they win 1 or 2 of these games, I think they will go against Minnesota in week 18, game on the line or not, and I think they will win. Unless they are resting their starters, I think they will beat Minnesota still. I think they can still run the ball efficiently. They can still easily put up 30 to 40 points on offense. And if the defense can just get a little bit better, right? If they cannot allow the massive chunk plays like they did against Buffalo, they can still be all right. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. It is not time to hit the panic button. It is not time to concede to the NFL season. The Detroit Lions are 12-2. They play 2 sub-500 teams in the next 2 weeks before going in for a division rival showdown to decide the conference. There is still a lot to play for. There is still a lot at stake, and the Lions are still a good enough football team to get it done. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know your opinions down in the comments below. I'd be very curious to hear what you guys have to say and what you guys think. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have yet to subscribe, please make sure you go down and do so. But until next time, and as always, go Lions.